Well, welcome everybody. Welcome to our Zoom link tonight. Thank you for joining us. I'm going to start by acknowledging the traditional custodians on the lands where we live and where we work. I acknowledge that I'm zooming in from the land of the Dharawal country, and our other two panelists are zooming in from the NJP office, which is on the land of the Gadigal people of the Aurora Nation. So wherever you are zooming in from, it's from land where First Nations peoples have walked for millennia. So we celebrate the beauty in the Aboriginal languages, the songlines, the dances and the stories. We celebrate that Aboriginal people have a living spiritual, cultural and social connection with the land. We recognise the resilience, the strength and the pride of the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander communities, and we pay respects to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander elders, past and present, and we extend that respect to First Nations peoples we work with, to our brave clients, and to people who are here with us tonight. Thank you for attending this session. We have many people joining us tonight, and we have people from many different walks with NJP. We have some donors, we have people who offer in-kind and pro bono legal support. We have people who sign our petitions and share our posts. So thank you for what you do for NJP. We could not do the work we do without your support, and thank you for joining us this evening. My name is Naomi Lai, and I'm a solicitor and the General Manager at the National Justice Project. And I'm delighted to introduce you to our other two speakers. Sadly, it was meant to be three other speakers. However, our founder and CEO, George Newhouse, is actually at home in bed sick without a voice. So he sends his gratitude and thanks you for coming tonight, and he's sorry he couldn't be here. Let me introduce you to Lieutenant Colonel Michael Dan Mori. Dan is recognised globally for his legal defence and refugee work. He represented David Hicks, and he has worked in many countries around the world, including Cambodia, looking after refugees. Dan is one of the three founders of the National Justice Project, and he's still a director on our board. Ashleigh Buckett is also on our screen, and Ashleigh is National Justice Project's Associate Legal Director. And together with Emma Hearn, Ashleigh leads up our legal team. This week, we enter the World Refugee Day on the 20th of June. And that's one of the reasons we're here tonight. We're here tonight to discuss the latest developments in refugee settlement and protection. And we'll also give you an update of some of National Justice Project's work in the refugee space. We currently have 40 cases in the federal court, and Ash will actually fill you in a little bit about that later on. If you have any questions throughout the night, there is a Q&A box down below. Please write your questions in there, and we will actually get to those later in the night. So you're not here to listen to me. Let's hand over to Dan. I've got some questions and we're going to listen to Dan. So Dan, it's been about a year since you were last in Australia. Can you tell us why you're back in the country?
Yeah, sure. It's great to be back. I've had an opportunity to come back and teach at Monash University. Last year, I came back last June for the first time after COVID, so couldn't teach for 2 years. So it's great to be back for a second year in person and interact with all the law students and master's students down there in Melbourne, and to come back up and be in person with NJP, which is wonderful.
Yeah, it's always nice to have you back in our office. Now that Dan, you are someone who's frequently visited Australia. You have a long running history. Do you want to tell us a little bit about how you developed a connection with the Australian refugee rights movement?
Well, my first connection with Australia started back in '88 when I came here on a rugby tour, many years ago when I was young and athletic. And then I moved here in 2012 in working with Shine Lawyers and working with George Newhouse in the Social Justice Department. And we started looking at refugee issues and trying to figure out how best to affect change in this space and in the area of social justice. From my experience in the US, there were plenty of programs or legal advocacy groups like the ACLU, Center for Constitutional Rights in New York, the Southern Poverty Law Center, that was really focused on using the law and cases to create change in the social justice area. And George, myself, and Duncan really saw this opportunity to help in the refugee space by creating an organization that could use litigation, legal advocacy for social good.
Yeah, thanks, Dan. Do you want to tell us a little bit? We know that the US is your home. Do you want to tell us a little bit about back in the US, what you've been working on in the past year?
Yeah, well, I've been working on more on a personal level. Being involved from a legal aspect and being an advocate or working on people's cases. I took the opportunity last year to get personally involved and help resettle an Afghan family in our community through a program that the US government started, sort of sponsorship circles. These circles are groups of community members that get together to help resettle Afghans.
Okay, and then do you want to tell us a little bit about this program? How in the US the sponsor program actually works? Yeah,
so it was obviously with the fall of Afghanistan, and the military and government partners with Afghan citizens that had worked with US forces for so many years. There was a huge humanitarian need to get these people out. And the US government was working to do it, but had been so overwhelmed by the numbers. And the ordinary system of trying to process and assist people was very bogged down. And these Afghan families were being held in military bases in Germany or within the US. And so the government actually sort of applauded for doing this and saying, let's kind of remove the bureaucracy and open it up to just American citizens that want to get together and take the responsibility for settling one of these families in our communities.
Yeah, interesting. And we've been able to see a number of families that have actually settled in that. But we know it's not perfect. Do you want to talk about some of the limitations that you've come up against?
Well, sure, because it's settled almost 78,000 in a very short time, which is an immense number. And so by having people pull together, we had to raise money to support the family and help them with their English, get them their driver's license, get them work, and get the kids into school. But there was a huge, it's a huge number, 78,000 put into the system. And now you're trying to get them their permanent status. And that is very backlogged. And it really needs to be, the government has to try to solve that situation.
Yeah, absolutely. Now it's very interesting to hear about the US. So thank you for explaining that to us. But also, you're a very wise person. Would love to know what insights you have, Dan, about what you've learned overseas that you think we could actually learn here in Australia. What things are that we can grow in? What things can we learn from? Yeah.
I thought the process by allowing citizens to get together, to register with the government and say, we're this members in our community and we're ready to support financially, our own personal time, and take the responsibility for welcoming people to our country, and understanding what they've been through. And it was something that's gone across the United States. And I know there's been opportunities in Australia where people have obviously welcomed, but trying to formalize them so that communities can sponsor and bring people in and really welcome people in their community and take some ownership on this whole immigration process.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Dan. And I'm sure there's already some questions that I can see popping up that we'll come to later. But I think I'm going to hand over to you, Dan, for you to have a chat with Ash as well.
Well, I do. I love to be here in person with Ashleigh, even though she's right down the hall. Got to be at a different computer. And most of the year I'm watching what NJP is doing from afar at the board meetings, but it's great to be in person and really see the hard work. Here it's not even 5:30 at night, and there's people still working because they're dedicated. But Ashleigh, I know you've been busy. Some major refugee justice cases over the past 5 years. Where are you at now?
Yeah, thanks so much, Dan. Great to have you here, even though we're in separate spaces. So as you would know, NJP has a cohort of about 40 compensation cases for refugees who've sustained injuries while in Australia's offshore immigration detention system. we're arguing in those cases that the government has a duty of care towards refugees that they send to offshore detention. And we're running the test cases in the Federal Court of Australia, where we're hoping to set a precedent.
Excellent. And how do you get these cases? How do they come to NJP?
Yeah, that's a great question. So it was actually George who ran the first case that sought an urgent injunction to transfer someone for medical care on the basis that the Australian government has a duty of care to refugees it sends to offshore immigration detention. So following that initial case, NJP has acted for kids and adults in Australian offshore immigration detention in similar urgent injunctions where they've had a need to be transferred for urgent medical treatment. So following that work, we worked closely with others in the refugee sector, and the work kind of culminated into the Kids Off Nauru campaign. And following that, the Medivac legislation. So it was part of a real sector effort, I suppose, to get that outcome. Now that we're running these compensation damages claims and hoping to set that precedent that I've just outlined, I suppose it's not only hoping to obtain accountability for our individual clients, but to change the way that refugees are treated in Australia.
And through these compensation cases, what are you hoping that will be changed for future individuals? How will they be treated differently?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. So the cases touch on the individual situations of our clients, which are actually quite varied. Because there's such a large cohort, we're running a couple of test cases first to try to settle the law. So the outcome of that will be, well, one, hopefully to have some form of accountability and acknowledgement of harm on an individual basis. The ability for those clients to then go and choose their own medical care and things like that. There's such a lack of autonomy in the way that refugees are treated by the Australian state, not only when they were in offshore immigration detention, but also now that they're in Australia. And finally, and more broadly, it would be to set that precedent and to create a situation where the government cannot go on with its offshore immigration processing system because of the way it's been so harmful in the past, setting a precedent where they have a duty of care towards people that they put there, disincentivizes continuing to treat people in such a harmful way.
How close are we to getting it to the end game, to getting it over the line?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I want to acknowledge that it's been a really long process for a lot of our clients. A lot of our clients we were involved with at the time we ran their urgent injunctions to get them medical care, as long ago as in 2018 when I actually first started with NJP. So it's been a really long road, and we'd love to see a result as soon as possible for our clients, but it really does depend on the test cases, whether they settle or proceed to hearing next year, and then we'll look forward to having an outcome following that. I think the good news is that NJP has done so much of the groundwork to support the legal argument underpinning the cases. So when it does run, we'll be ready for that. But having said that, there's still a lot of work to do. So every day the team is working on these cases, and we've got much more to do. But I feel that we're on track, and I'm hoping to be able to update our clients, sort of towards the end of this year, early next year as well.
And obviously, once you get done with this, then it's on to the next challenge, right?
Absolutely. And, obviously NJP works on a broad range of matters, but I want to acknowledge as well that this issue isn't in isolation. Many of our clients, not only have they suffered harm in offshore immigration detention, but while they've been in Australia, they've faced so many challenges, whether that be inadequate ongoing care, challenges with visas, lack of visas and being in a state of limbo. There's a lot more to do.
I mean, that's the parallel to what I dealt with in the US. I mean, medical care and was such a huge issue, and giving them the choice of care where they wanted to go, where they could get the best services. And how do you have you seen some successes? Do you see the changes in people's lives that this makes?
Well, I think if we can set the precedent and obtain an outcome for our clients on an individual basis, that will be a very important thing for them, as well as, you know, for future refugee policy in Australia and the way the law plays out. But certainly in cases where we have been able to achieve outcomes already, it really does make a difference in terms of accessing care. I mean, that is really a big thing, that people have been denied their autonomy for such a long time. And so I think if we are able to resolve these cases and hand over some control to a degree to the clients to choose their own care, that will just be invaluable.
I mean, changing policy creates such systemic change for, you don't know how many people in the future, but they're hopefully going to avoid the problems that if others have had to face. Naomi, is there questions that people have?
Yeah, no, it's interesting. I've got 3 ways of getting questions here. There have been some in the Q&A. There's been some that people have just sent in privately. And then I had a couple that were actually sent in just before we started. So I'm going to start. Can I throw in a question? I've actually got some for both of you, but I'm going to start with Dan's question. Dan, what is your personal story, and how did you start legal work, and how did that turn into social justice legal work?
Oh, wow.
Yeah, not to put you on the spot, Dan.
I know my life story in under 30 seconds. No, look, I sort of say I accidentally became a lawyer. I had been in the military first as an enlisted Marine. I went to uni, wasn't sure what I wanted to do, whether I was going to go back in the military as an officer or not. And the opportunity was presented to me. Hey, we've got a law slot. Would you like to go to law school? And I'm like, what do I have to do? And so I sort of accidentally became a lawyer. And while I was working in law school, one of my first clinics where I actually got to work with clients was for disabled individuals that were in an institution that had disabilities ranging from very significant impairment that were unable for any physical movement to those that had just had epilepsy as a child back in the 50s. And yet the way the country dealt with that was to institutionalize them. And they'd been so institutionalized, they couldn't go out on their own. And so it was advocating for these people that didn't have someone to stand up for them. And I did that for a year. And I think that really educated me to the world, that there are people that need help. And I think I took that passion that I got from that clinic into my career in the military, representing individuals in criminal cases, or when I got lucky or unlucky enough to get assigned to Guantanamo.
Thank you. Yeah, interesting. I didn't even know that about you, Dan. Really interesting. Thank you. Ash, I've got a couple of questions I'm going to throw to you. Start with an easy one. Are all the clients that we work with recognised as refugees?
Yes, they are. I do want to make one point on that, though. Yes, our clients are refugees. They're recognised refugees. But one of the great injustices is that when our clients are brought to Australia for urgent medical care, they're in a situation of limbo because they're considered transitory persons, which limits their ability to apply for visas in Australia because they're not they don't have an Australian refugee status determination. So that's a matter of immigration law. NJP doesn't do immigration law, but I thought it was worth pointing out that it's just a ridiculous system, essentially, when our clients are refugees under international law, and they've had a determination of refugee law in offshore detention where the Australian government has sent them for processing.
Absolutely.
Hey, Naomi, I saw a question by one talking about people that are hoping for change right from the government and waiting for the government to make change. What can an ordinary person do? And I think it's, you can vote. That's the first thing. And you can shape those policies by communicating with your elected officials on what you want to see the change to be. And you can get involved. You can volunteer. You can support organizations. I mean, there's so many refugee organizations out there that you can support by volunteering for them. Everyone thinks support means donating money. No, you can give your time and get involved in communities where their refugees are getting settled. It takes everybody doing a little bit to make things change, and getting the right politicians and policies passed is obviously the easiest thing, but all would be the quickest, but not always the fastest.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually the next question is looking at that. So Ash, how are we dealing with the political situation in this case when both the ALP and the LNP have the same policy and the same hardline policy, especially against medical care, but offshore detention as well?
Yeah, it's a great question. Thanks, Naomi. And it is really disappointing that both the major parties basically have the same position on this. So we're suing the Commonwealth of Australia, and that has just continued despite the change of government. So the case remains against the Commonwealth of Australia.
That's right. And actually, just to throw that in there, that's one of the reasons why NJP doesn't take any money from the government, is because in nearly all of our cases, we're actually against the government. Absolutely. Some really other good questions here. There's a number of them here. I apologise if we don't get through all of them, but here's the next one. How can a precedent be set when each individual case is settled by immigration before the court can rule? Best interest of the client leads to settlement, and the department knows this. How to get past that on this issue?
Yeah, oh, you go, Dan.
No. It's a great question. You go, Ashley, because I'll you want to go or you want me to go?
No, sure. I mean, at this stage, we still have test cases being run. They are due to go to hearing. So we'll see the outcome of that. But it is a very good point. You do have an obligation to do what's in the best interests of your client, and that might be to settle a case. But we are on track for the moment to be running test cases. And I'd say as well, it goes back to what Dan was mentioning previously about the importance of community engagement and community pressure on government to change policies, because as someone had pointed out before, the situation hasn't really changed despite the change of government. And so there is a really big role for community pressure to lead for better changes for refugees.
And it's hard because, that hits the whole issue of, is it a client or is it cause? And sometimes that, what's best for your client may not be best for the cause. And it's an ethical dilemma for any attorney. But the goal is to have as many clients as you can, right? And you might settle one for one client, but you can run it the distance for another. And so having the ability like NJP to have as many lawyers as possible, to run as many cases as possible is important.
That's right. And I think it's also worth noting that we recognise that a settlement is also a win. It's a different type of win, but we all know that money hurts. So if we're going against the government and they're being hurt over and over and over again, they're not going to want to be in the same situation. So definitely, a precedent would be amazing, but as lawyers, our number one, we need to look after the clients. But as Dan just said, some clients will want to go the distance as well. Let's have a look. Yeah, there's a few questions saying similar things. We also were really hoping a change of government would change some of these issues, but yeah, that unfortunately hasn't been the case. The question is, what do you suggest an ordinary person? Oh, that's the one that you just asked, wasn't it, Dan? Ordinary person like us. Absolutely.
There's one supporting ourselves. I'm very curious because it's one person asked, how the people within NJP that are working in this area that could have a lot of transferred or referred trauma, that secondary. Ashleigh, how do you and all your coworkers here in NJP, what do you do to make sure that you're getting taking care of yourselves?
Yeah, thanks, Dan. It's a great question. for any lawyers or anyone really working on human rights issues in Australia, there is a high risk of vicarious trauma. And it is really important to look after yourselves to be able to continue doing the work for your clients. And I want to recognise the, the experiences of my clients and their amazing resilience after what they've faced. So at NJP, we are really lucky because this is something that's taken very seriously at a management level. We do mental health first aid training, self-care and trauma-informed training as well. We engage with the Law Society's wellbeing programs. We have our own EAP program. And I suppose underpinning all of that, we have a strong system of mentorship. And I really think that is so key. Particularly, we have a lot of junior lawyers working at NJP. Well, I say a lot, a handful, not a huge firm. And I think it's really important for anyone coming in at a junior level to have, a high degree of mentorship as they work on these cases, to look after them and to support them to do the best possible job for our clients, because that's why we're here. We care so much about assisting our clients and working with our clients to try to get those outcomes.
Absolutely. And I think it's also good to show the size of NJP. We do a lot of work. So these 40 cases that we've been talking about is about a third of our workload in the legal department. So we do have a number of cases, but we are still fairly small. I think we have 9 current lawyers at the moment and 3 paralegals. So a small team that does a whole lot of work. There was a question at the start, Ash, I want to quickly go back to. Ash is actually also the chair of our RAP committee. So we take that very seriously as well. And I really like this question. Let me go find it. Do you acknowledge the lands have never been ceded? That's a really lovely question. Do you want to speak to that, Ash, as the RAP chair?
Yeah, thanks, Naomi. I did see that in the Q&A chat, and yes, absolutely. NJP does acknowledge that we are working and living on unceded sovereign Aboriginal land. So yeah, thank you for raising that, Joe. Yeah, and if you're interested in taking a look at our Reconciliation Action Plan as well, you can find that online on the Reconciliation Australia website.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Ash.
There was one.
Oh, sorry, you go.
Okay, I was going to say no. There was one that was talking about the funding for reports and things like that. And talk. Are there other organizations that support NJP's work through discounted expenses that give discounts to do this type of work and give that way?
It's a good question. It's a good question. So obviously for all of the cases we have, we do need to prove that harm has been done. And the way we need to do that is we need to get the doctors, the specialists in their field to actually write these reports. Medical reports are expensive. So some of the doctors, some of the psychiatrists we use do offer some discount. They're still expensive. I'm the one who sees each invoice as it comes through our organisation, and really our reports often is somewhere between $4,000 and $12,000 per report. So they're expensive, and most cases we need at least a couple of reports. We do have some very kind doctors who work for us, and sometimes they let us pay back the report over time. We do have a couple of people like that, but this is the cost of doing law, and this is the cost of really working in trying to make change. We need to show the harm that has been done.
And how do you, and are there other professionals that offer some sort of financial discount to NJP, to barristers? Or we get barristers that work for free sometimes, or that donate their time, or at a discounted rate?
Ash, I'll let you answer.
Yes. Yeah, thank you.
I just want to make sure they're recognized. There's people that are.
Absolutely. Look, we are lucky and work with some amazing barristers and pro bono partners. So Some of our pro bono partners, some of the big law firms have assisted us with discovery in these cases. We've been through thousands of documents to build our case, and it's really because we've had the opportunity to collaborate with those firms and work with their lawyers on getting through those documents that we've been able to do it. As Naomi said, we're, you know, a very small legal team of about 9 lawyers. So very grateful to them, and of course so grateful as well to the barristers involved in this case. Jeffrey Watson SC has really led the work in this field, the urgent injunctions. He's counsel on the test cases as well, along with Diana Tang, and it's just been such a privilege to work with such a compassionate, caring person who has done just so much free work to help us and to help refugees who've come to Australia.
And there was another question about, we don't take money from governments. How do you pay your wages?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's a good question. So the National Justice Project is a charity. We are a charity where we survive on the goodwill of people like yourselves. We survive on the goodwill of Australians who want to see change. Probably about a third of our income does come from our legal work. Now, that we do not take any money from our clients. That is something that we are very different to most law firms. We do not charge our clients, and we want to run cases for people who other law firms wouldn't take. So we run these cases, and the way we get funding is if we win, and we nearly always win, and if the judge then says to the other side that they need to pay our legal costs. So that's how we get some of our funding. It's about a third of our budget, and then the other 2/3 of our budget comes through philanthropy, comes through trusts and foundations, comes through some major donors, and comes through grassroots, comes through people who, some people give, you know, $5 a month. Some people give a one-off donation through the year. Some people chip away each paycheck, you know, they might send us a few dollars from. So we actually survive by the donations of amazing people. Right now, we are in our end of financial year, last campaign of the financial year. So I'm sure the person in the background here, Tim, might even put the link in to our chat now. We do have a campaign going on, and the campaign actually at the moment is specifically for these 40 cases. We have a campaign going on at the moment to help us pay the medical reports needed and to help pay for the lawyers working on these cases. So yeah, you're right, we don't take money from the government. And before I started working at NJP, I was already someone who knew about NJP. And so I know what it's like to be on the other side, people who actually see the good work that NJP are doing and want to be involved, you know, and often people are busy, but they want their voices to be heard. So it's people like yourself who want to see change. So thank you. Thank you to the people who are here who do actually support us. You're the ones who enable us to do this work. Were there any other final questions? Let's have a look. We've got just a couple more minutes before I wrap up. Oh, actually, there's one other question that's just been sent to me. Ash, how many of the clients that you're working with in these 40 cases are children?
So the majority are children, and yeah, quite a few of our clients were kids at the time the harm was caused to them, and are now adults, but certainly, yeah, the majority are kids or were kids at the time the harm was caused.
Thank you, Ash. I'm aware of the time. I'm aware it's after hours. So I'll just close up for us soon. But I want to acknowledge, as it's already been spoken about in the questions, we have amazing support. We have amazing support from pro bono lawyers, from barristers, from people who give us in-kind work. We have people who donate to us. We have people who share our petitions. We have people who turn up to our webinars, who learn about what we're doing, who can tell other people. So thank you. Thank you for all the different ways of support that people give to us. There will be an email that will be sent around either later tonight or tomorrow morning that will actually explain a little bit more about these cases, and we'll actually share the link for our end of financial year campaign as well. And if you can, it would be fantastic if you can support that. If not, feel free to just share it on to other people who may be able to support as well. So thank you. Thank you to Dan. Thanks, Dan, for being in our office and for sharing your wisdom tonight. Thanks to our amazing Ashleigh, who heads up the legal team. It's really great to hear from them. And thank you to everyone for your amazing questions. We hope you have a lovely, safe night, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.